Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni miliwanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jed Lee, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted and so very honored that you join us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to tell all of your family and friends about the show. And please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, wherever you find your podcasts. Our guest today is Shana Gozansky. She's here to celebrate my art book of adventure. Before we invite Shana into the studio, we want to let you know that this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by Lucas and the Game of Chance, a thrilling middle grade novel written by Anthony L. Manna. It is a Reading with Your Kids certified great read. While Lucas is playing his flute at the seawall one day, he befriends a mysterious talking, dancing snake that rewards him with fortune and favor. Some years later, tempted by greed and pride, Lucas loses all of his riches and his family. He must now set off on a treacherous journey through a frightening forest filled with suspense and strange creatures to find Destiny, her son Ilion, the sun, and her daughter Luna, the moon. These celestial guardians will surely allow him to reverse his misfortune, restore his honor, and win back all that he loves and treasures. Won't they? A reimagined Greek folktale, Lucas and the Game of Chance, is illuminated with dramatic and evocative pen and ink drawings that provide an ideal backdrop for the dark intrigue that fills this haunting story of human struggle, courage, and resilience. To put it another way, you and your kids are going to love this book. Lucas and the Game of Chance by Anthony L. Manna. It is a Reading with Your Kids certified great read. Join us right now from right outside the beautiful city of Boston. I could probably throw her a football if I could throw past a couple of yards. Our guest is here today to celebrate her great new board book. It's called My Art Book of Adventure. Please welcome to the show, Shana Gozansky. Shana, how are you?
I'm doing great, Jed. How are you?
I'm wonderful. I can't wait for you to tell us all about My Art Book of Adventure. It sounds exciting.
It is exciting because adventure is very exciting.
Well, you know, this book is for, kids who enjoy nibbling on books. And, I had never thought about it until I was a parent, but every moment of a toddler's life is an adventure because they're experiencing all these new things. You and I were talking a little bit about travel before we started recording. And
yeah.
So when we travel, like maybe once or twice a year, we get to experience being in a new place. A toddler gets to experience that like all day, every day.
That was one of the main things I wanted to articulate in the book, that anything can become an adventure. And I think about when I write these books, because it's a series, I think not just about the tyke who is getting read to and who's exploring the images and thinking about these themes, but the grown-ups who are reading to them, to offer them their own sort of reminder that anything can be an adventure, or to think differently about some of these themes and how to weave them into your day in a different way than maybe occurred to you naturally. So one of the things is specifically like going to the park can be an adventure. This way, we kind of all get to name what our adventures are for ourselves, because like you said, everything is an adventure for a toddler. So what does it mean to take that energy of adventure out into the world for going to the grocery store? And just finding ways to add the magic and fun of adventure in minute ways and large ways.
Yeah. You know, I think if parents do that with their kids, if they keep in mind that they are going on an adventure with their kids, a lot of the tasks that seem so overwhelming, because we all know the parents are working so hard. And, you know, they're coming home and they have a boss that's, you know, making them crazy and work that is just way too much and they're not getting paid enough. And they're coming home. And if you're living anywhere like in the city of Boston, they have to send an arm and a leg in for rent every month. And the last thing they want to do is have to drag their kid to the grocery store to do that shopping that needs to get done. And dragging kids is such a drag. You don't want to do that anyways. But if instead you can do this little mind trick and tell yourself you're not dragging your kid to the grocery store, you're not doing this thing that you have to do. Instead, you're going on an adventure with your kid. Suddenly, it ain't so bad. It's something you can look forward to.
I also think that a lot of parents adventure needs to be something new and exciting for littlest kids. And in some ways, my hope is that they cut themselves a break and remember that because everything is an adventure to a toddler, taking them to the store and ask them to find for things with a certain color on it, it's the adventure for them. So you don't yourself into or much about providing all of these huge events, and your framework is going to looking for a bird while you're there can be as meaningful an adventure as getting on a plane and flying to a different city.
I really like that idea of going out and it's kind of being mindful. You know, instead of, you know, for parents, instead of just, you know, being swept up in everything that has to be done during the day, you're actually modeling to your kids that I have the power to kind of take control and to make my day what I want it to be. And yes, I'm going to get everything done, but it's not going to be a chore and it's not going to be something that I have to do. It's something that I want to do. And you know what, little baby, I want to do this with you.
I love that. Yeah. And I think also the books in the whole series kind of have, I think, a bit of a mindfulness in all of it, in that there is something about sitting and looking at images and really looking at them and exploring them that is its own mindfulness. It sort of slows us down. And one of the things that I love about the books is you could take out all the text and read it in one thing and get the message. You could also just read the pictures, and then together a very interesting conversation starts to happen about why this image with these words. And so that's its own little choose your own adventure within the books themselves, which I really love.
We advocate for all parents to take picture walks through books with their kids as often as they can. And not only board books, but picture books. You know, cover up that text if your kid is reading and just go through. And it's a lot of fun. I hear parents all the time complaining, I got to read that book again. It's the 500th time. You don't have to read it in the same way. You can read it in a different way. And a great way to kind of start your adventure with a book is by reading, experiencing as a picture walk and just walking through and thinking like, hey, baby, what do you see here? And what do you think is happening? And what do you think the reaction is? And after we go through this, let's read the story together and see how our thoughts line up with the authors. And who had the better story, the author or us?
And also, I think, too, that's teaching a really important skill in terms of how we observe and how we look at things, and almost learning about how our brains work, right? Like one person might really focus on sort of the space that's filled and the space that isn't, or the colors, or the way that things are drawn. And I think one of the things I really value about what we're able to accomplish with these books is offer so many different styles of visual art for kids and grown-ups to read and to engage with. And some of the artists are probably some are definitely incredibly well known historically. And then we have a lot of new artists that we get to introduce. And so for me, it's being able to go to a museum and feel like I'm sort of experiencing the artwork through my own lens, and sitting down to read a book to experience that artwork through its own lens are the same, they're the same thing. And I think we underestimate how valuable the looking and literacy of images can be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And, looking at beautiful images in a book like The Art of Adventure, it kind of takes away the experience of having the museum security guards freak out when you bring a baby into the art gallery.
Yes, please feel free to have your child slobber, touch, draw, add, edit, however they want to use these books is appropriate, and as much experience as they can get, tactile and otherwise, is fully supported.
One of the great things, and this is going to sound dumb, but that's what this podcast is all about, me sounding dumb with these very intelligent authors. But, board books are really fun because you're teaching kids, you're literally teaching kids how to consume media because they're chewing on the books, and it's like letting the kids know, this is a book. It's not this sacred thing that must be placed up on a shelf out of touch. It's like, bring it down, chew on it, stomp on it, experience it, and just love it and learn how to fall in love with books. And hopefully when a kid gets to be 5 or 6, they stop eating the books and will experience it in a different way.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And this idea of owning, like, once the book is written, it's no longer mine, right? Like, I sort of feel like once it's out of my hands, it goes out into the world, and I'm like, I'm curious to see what happens. Very similar to directing plays is, once the first audience arrives, it's not yours. You're done with it. And so you get to discover what its life is like. And I think one of the things that I really love is these sort of little bite-sized thematic things that everyone can both directly relate to and have an incredibly individual experience with. So I know people who've given these books to grown-ups because they feel like they encapsulate just a gem of something that they can then share with other people. So that's another thing. Like, when I read the books myself, if I haven't, gone back to it, I'm sort of like, I'm like, oh, that turned out pretty well. And B, I think realizing, like, I have my own relationship to this idea of adventure. And of course that's going to be in the book, but it's no longer mine once it's left my computer.
That's a really interesting observation. You, Shana, you were sharing with me that you direct plays, and that must be incredibly exciting. I present educational magic shows around the country, and one of the things that I never thought about when I was creating my magic show, My Magic, and it didn't occur to me until I did something and somebody experienced it in a way that I just hadn't imagined anybody experiencing it. And the reaction to it was like, I thought was, surprising. We'll just say it was surprising. But I mean, that's something that as a creative, whether you're an author, an illustrator, a playwright, a play director, an actor, a magician, musician, you're creating something and it means something to you. But once it gets out there, once you share it, because that's what art's all about, you kind of got to be ready to let you can't decide, no, that's not how you're supposed to experience that.
Yeah. And I think in some ways coming at this this work came later in my life. And so, I sort of brought a collaborator, director brain into it, which I think is very helpful for these books in particular, because it's image and text driven together, and I can't change the images, and I can't put text on them that sort of force the meaning of the image into a pigeonhole. It's a very delicate balance between aligning the visual and the text, but not prescribing meaning. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things that it has allowed me to do in the process of working with phenomenal editors who make or break what I do 100% and make me sound so good sometimes when I type things and I'm like, these are words, right? But one of the things that comes out of it is that ability to step fully back and both say, is this the specific? Am I being as specific as possible so that it can be as universal as possible? So it doesn't feel vague, but it feels expansive. And I think that is storytelling. You want to give enough of what's needed for people to feel oriented, but not so much that they feel dictated to. And I think in some ways the art forces me to have that space, because I am inviting these collaborators into this work. And so I want to make sure I'm also honoring my other collaborators, which are these amazing visual artists whose work I get to use.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Is there a favorite art piece in the book that you'd like to tell us about?
Oh my gosh. I might even have to go and open it up. So as I do that, I will say one of the things that I'm so proud of about these books is the expansiveness of art we have been able to showcase. So we really want to have a nice balance of sort of classical, canonical art pieces while also honoring and promoting contemporary artists of note working today. Oh, I know what my favorite piece is. Romina Bassau, and I'm not entirely sure I'm saying her name correctly. She's an Italian artist. Her studio is in Rome. And she does I started following her during the pandemic, and she does these incredibly beautiful, almost classical in their approach paintings, but of very contemporary situations. And there's a section in the book about how sometimes adventures can be really hard. And maybe you want to stay home instead of go on that adventure. And it's a beautiful image of a woman in a dress on her knees, face down, in a pillow on a stool with her face just in the pillow, like so exhausted and clearly not wanting to do anything. And I think that is just one of my favorites, in part because I started following her work not that long ago and felt like it articulated something to me about my own life experience. And then to get to put it in the book and have her agree to put it in the book is like, what a dream. Because then that feels like I get to support this artist whose work means a lot to me. I get to introduce her to a larger audience she would not necessarily have access to. And I get to put in this image, which I find so honest and humorous in the scope of this book.
That's cool. And it also brings up for the writers who are listening who think, oh, what a great idea this is, that it's not just, creating this book isn't just I want to put that picture on my book. It's like, yeah, well, you got to ask somebody permission before you can use their stuff.
Fortunately, I don't have to do that.
Right.
Thank God. But it is incredible that I get to say, I would really like this art piece. And then they go to the artist or their agent representation. And then sometimes we don't get permission. And then I'm really sad. And I'm like, but this piece is perfect. But I also am so grateful when we do, because then it feels a little bit like I get to do some of my own curation in sort of the gallery piece that is the book.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that's occurred to me as we were talking, and I was trying to find a way to kind of introduce this, and I'm just going to go out on a limb, and it might just sound dumb, but again, that's okay. I'm thinking, you know, we hear a lot about banned books these days, and books that some parents don't want their kids to see that, and some parents do want their kids to see this. And I am thinking that a book like The Art of Adventure, not so much even the book, but it's the conversations that we have with our kids when we're reading a book like The Art of Adventure, or any book that gives us an opportunity to have meaningful discussions with our kids. And you can have a very meaningful discussion with your kids of any age. It's a great way to start to, first off, when you're asking a kid, what do they think? That is so empowering, because you, believe it or not, parent, you are the most important person in your kid's life. They worship you, and they want you to care about what they're thinking about. So when you say, what do you think? Even if they disagree with you, even if it's the polar opposite, and you say, it's okay to think like that, I have a different opinion, that's huge. Yeah. And that's the beginning. So when we get to the point where they're getting into school and they're hearing about, well, this book is banned or what, you don't have to be afraid of books. You can sit down with that book that you're concerned about, and you can read it together, and you can let your kid know why you're concerned.
Yeah. I also think too, it's like, I think about every book as the beginning of a conversation, right? Even if it's a silly story about jam on the floor, like that is the beginning of a conversation about what do we do when there's jam on the floor. And so I often, when I read through a draft of the book as we're getting closer to finalizing things, as I read it, I kind of envision myself with a tot in my lap and me kind of flipping the pages. And what does that feel like? Does that feel like it's calming me? Is it exciting me? Is it taking me on a journey where maybe I feel a rise and fall? But the intimacy of reading to someone and then having a conversation about it, either then or later, or even just referencing it later, feels so meaningful, and feels like that is the beauty of having books in your home, is having these moments of connection and touchstones that you can go back to together. Yeah. So yeah, I agree. And I think books should always be about conversation, not about censorship or hiding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know that my art book of adventure is just one in a series of my art books. And you talk about friendship, you talk about love. What a cool job you have.
It is so cool. It's so cool, especially because I minored in art history. And so I was actually recently able to email my professor in college, who kind of opened up my mind to art history and looking at art from a more critical, nuanced, layered perspective. And I got to write her and just say, like, I just want you to know I wouldn't be able to do these books without the work that you shared with me when I was 18 and 19. And there's something so meaningful about that too, because regardless of what I'm doing, art is at the center of my life. And it is so cool to write these books that I know people to see them in the wild, to get pictures of kids reading these books and to see them looking at the art. I've even gotten pictures of kids like opening the book to their favorite artwork and then drawing their own version of it. It's unbelievable, and it's a dream I didn't even know I had, and I am constantly in awe that it came true.
That's wonderful. Well, that is really, really wonderful. Now, I'll be honest with you. I was really surprised. I took an art appreciation class in high school, and I kind of took it as this is going to be easy. I don't have to really work hard at this. And I ended up working really hard at it because I really liked it a lot. And I continued, I didn't major or minor in art in college, but I took as many of those classes as I could because I did really love it and loved learning about it. But I have to tell you something. I have to be very, very honest with you, Shana. When I go into a museum, a contemporary art museum, and I see this big, huge canvas and it's blue.
Yeah.
I don't get it. I just look and I go, I'm sorry. I'm trying.
Yeah. And one of the things that I think is really incredible too is like there is an appreciation of art on the whole, an appreciation of the historical context of like why is that piece there and why does it matter at all in the lineage of contemporary modern art. And then there is something about going to a contemporary art museum and having an emotional experience that is either like you can look at one thing and be like, that's incredible, and the next thing and be so frustrated. And that is to me, that is incredible that visual art can meet our emotions and activate our emotions simply by looking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that nothing physically is engaging with us necessarily, but just the act of observation creates an emotional response. And one of the things that we talk about as we're putting the book together and as I'm kind of looking at pieces is when I'm doing more abstracted stuff, like when the paintings are or the sculptures are a little bit more abstracted, how can I provide a text that allows that window of understanding of why this image with these words so that it's less about understanding the art and more about understanding the pairing and the communication, and then that opening the door to your individual experience. But I love going to museums when people get frustrated because I feel like, let's get into it. Like what's frustrating or what's exciting or what makes you feel uneasy. Because so much of art to me is to spark the conversation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And get your brain going.
It does. And I'll be, one of the most fun things, and I did a lot of fun things with both of my kids, but my daughter, I went with her and a couple of her friends to the Institute of Contemporary Art here in Boston when she was in high school. And we had a lot of fun conversations about some of the pieces that we're looking at.
I also really like taking kids who are sort of quote unquote too young for museums. And so many museums have incredible children's guides and things and activities and things like that. But honestly, sometimes if you just say to a toddler, like, go find all the bathtub paintings or go find a painting where you can see someone's tushy or go find a painting with a horse, right? That is an incredible way to use a museum as like its own adventure of kind of how can you play almost hide and seek so that your kid starts to see these spaces as theirs.
Yeah.
Too, that they belong there as well. Because some of the kids reading these books will become art appreciators. Some of the kids will become artists themselves. And some of them will be like, this is not for me, but thank you so much. And all of those are valid, but it's about creating the opportunities for kids and grown-ups to discover that.
Yeah, absolutely. We need to know where we can go to discover more about you and more about the Art Book of Adventure and all the other books in the series.
Yeah, so the My Art Book series are published through Phaidon, and you can find them on their website, at your local booksellers, at your local museum gift shop, at all the big places that you can go online to buy things. It's in pre-order right now. But all the other ones are available. My Art Book of Love, Sleep, Friendship, and Happiness. And I am all over the internet. I have www.shanagozansky.com, which will be in process of kind of becoming a bit more nuanced of a website. And you can find me on Instagram at Shaygo, Shaygo.
We've had a great time speaking to the author of My Art Book of Adventure. Our guest has been Shana Gozansky. Shana, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much, and thank you for this podcast and supporting all of us writers.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Lindsay Gazicki will be back in the studio. She is an awesome guest. You don't want to miss her. Want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we're going to start by thanking our guest, Shana Gozansky. Please be sure to check out My Art Book of Adventure. Also, want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Ann O'Leary, Soji Franklin, Monica Rivera Sosa. I want to thank our sponsor, Anthony Almana. Please be sure to check out Lucas and the Game of Chance. And of course, I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. And all of us, we want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.